His daughter was always ill, so they told me every month. Her fevers, endless doctor visits, fragile moods, the whispered fears that hung in the thrumming New York penthouse air. But no one ever asked me what I saw behind closed doors. Maybe you're taking care of children whose parents never notice your efforts, or cleaning up while the house is quiet. Tell me. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? I promise today's story will touch your heart. My name is Margaret, and I want to tell you about the 3 years I spent in a glass tower on the Upper East Side, caring for a little girl who became my whole world. 3 years of watching her suffer, while everyone around her lived in willful blindness. 3 years of being the only one who truly saw what was happening to an innocent child in a house full of millions but empty of love. I can still smell the antiseptic scent that seemed to follow little Ava Miller everywhere, not the clean smell of a well-kept home, but something clinical, cold, like the pediatric wing of Mount Sinai where we spent so many sleepless nights. The Miller penthouse on Fifth Avenue had 47 windows. I counted them during the long hours I spent pacing with Ava in my arms, watching the city lights twinkle like distant stars while she burned with yet another mysterious fever. My hands remember everything. The way her tiny fingers would curl around mine when the pain hit her in waves. How her platinum blonde hair felt like silk against my rough palms. Hands that had spent 63 years working, washing, folding, cleaning, caring for everyone except myself. I remember the weight of her fragile body, barely 30 pounds at age 4, when most children her age were robust and running wild in Central Park just blocks away. The morning I first walked into that penthouse, my heart was already broken. I had answered their advertisement in the New York Times. Experienced nanny sought for delicate child, excellent references required, compensation above market rate. The words had jumped off the page at me as I sat in my tiny studio apartment in Queens, surrounded by medical bills I could never pay and memories I could never escape. You see, I had lost my own daughter 25 years ago, Marianne. She was 7 when the cancer took her, and ever since then, I had been trying to fill the hole in my heart by caring for other people's children. But the Miller family was different from all the others. They weren't just wealthy. They were emotionally bankrupt in ways I had never encountered. Richard Miller had made his vast fortune by investing in stocks on the stock market, building an empire that stretched across Manhattan's financial district. His net worth was estimated at over $200 million, with assets in everything from commercial real estate to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency investments. The penthouse alone was worth $23 million. Yet for all their financial abundance, there was a poverty of spirit in that house that chilled me to the bone. Mrs. Elena Miller was a former runway model who still moved through life as if cameras were following her every step. She was stunning, cold as winter marble, and about as emotionally available as a fashion magazine. She spoke to me in clipped sentences, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Margaret, you'll find that Ava requires constant supervision," she had told me on that first day, her manicured fingernails clicking against her iPhone screen as she scrolled through what looked like stock portfolios and investment reports. "She's always been sickly, very delicate. The doctors say it's just her constitution, but we can't be too careful." That first night, as I tucked Ava into her princess bed, that probably cost more than most people's cars, she looked up at me with eyes that held too much knowledge for a 4-year-old. They were the palest blue, almost gray, like storm clouds gathering over the Hudson River. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just watched me with the wariness of a wounded animal. "Are you going to hurt me?" she whispered so quietly I almost missed it. My heart shattered right there in that pink and gold nursery, surrounded by toys that cost hundreds of dollars each but had never been played with, books with pristine pages that had never been read aloud, stuffed animals arranged more for decoration than comfort. "Oh, my sweet girl," I said, sitting on the edge of her bed and gently smoothing her hair. "I would never hurt you. Never. I'm here to take care of you, to keep you safe." She studied my face for a long moment, then slowly, tentatively, reached for my hand. Her tiny fingers were ice cold despite the fever that had been raging for 3 days. That night, I held her while she shivered and cried, and I made a promise to myself and to her. I would protect this child with everything I had, even if it cost me everything. The routine they had established was exhausting and bizarre. Every morning at 5:30, I would prepare Ava's breakfast: bland oatmeal, weak tea, toast cut into perfect squares. She was on a restricted diet, they said, because of her sensitive stomach. While the rest of the family ate fresh fruit and pastries from Zabar's, Ava got plain crackers and water. I would dress her in clothes that were always too big, always in pale colors that made her look even more fragile than she was. Then came the morning medications, pills that seemed to multiply every week, each one prescribed by a different specialist at different hospitals across the city. I watched her struggle to swallow them, her little face scrunching up in distaste, and something deep in my gut told me this wasn't right. But who was I to question? I was just the nanny, just the help, just an old woman from Queens who had never finished high school and whose greatest credential was a broken heart that understood suffering. The days blended together in a haze of doctor appointments, pharmacy runs, and long hours in hospital waiting rooms that smelled like disinfectant and despair. Mount Sinai, NYU Langone, Columbia Presbyterian, we knew them all. The medical bills alone could have funded a small business, but money was never an object for the Millers. Richard's investment portfolio generated more in dividends each month than most families made in a year. What struck me most was how detached Elena was during these medical crises. When Ava would spike a fever of 104 degrees, I would be the one rushing her to the emergency room, while Elena finished her Pilates class or attended another charity luncheon at the Metropolitan Club. When Ava collapsed in the hallway one Tuesday morning, her little body convulsing, I was the one who called 911 while Elena was getting her weekly facial at the spa. "She's just delicate," Elena would say whenever anyone asked about Ava's constant illness. "Some children are born that way. We're very lucky to have Margaret. She's so devoted." Devoted. That word became a cage, a way to dismiss my concerns and observations as mere emotional attachment rather than the experienced eye of someone who had spent decades caring for children. But I was devoted, completely, desperately devoted to this little girl who had never known a day without pain, who flinched whenever adults raised their voices, who hoarded crackers under her pillow like a prisoner saving rations. At night, when the penthouse grew quiet and the city lights painted patterns on the marble floors, Ava would climb into my lap and whisper stories. Not fairy tales or childhood fantasies, but strange, troubling accounts of things that didn't make sense. "Mama gives me special medicine when she's angry," she told me one night, her voice barely audible above the hum of the air conditioning. "It makes my tummy hurt, but she says it's good for me." "What kind of special medicine, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "The clear kind, from the bottle in her bathroom. She says it helps me be a good girl." My blood ran cold. I had never seen any clear medicine prescribed for Ava, and I was the one who administered all her medications. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the hallway outside her room, my mind racing with possibilities I didn't want to consider. The next morning, I tried to approach Elena about Ava's comment. She was sitting in her private office, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, reviewing what looked like Bitcoin investment reports on multiple computer screens. "Mrs. Miller, I wanted to ask you about Ava's medications." "Margaret." Her voice could have frozen the Hudson River. "I don't pay you to ask questions. I pay you to follow instructions. Ava gets the medications her doctors prescribe. Nothing more, nothing less." "But she mentioned something about medicine from your bathroom." Elena's head snapped up. her eyes flashing with something that looked like panic before quickly shifting to anger. "Ava has an active imagination. She says many things that aren't true. Surely someone with your experience knows that children often make up stories for attention." "Yes, ma'am," I said quietly, but something in her reaction told me Ava hadn't been making anything up. That afternoon, while Elena was at her weekly lunch with the other Upper East Side wives, I found myself cleaning the master bathroom. It was enormous, bigger than my entire apartment in Queens, with marble countertops and a medicine cabinet that looked like a small pharmacy. I shouldn't have looked. I knew it was wrong. But something compelled me to open that cabinet, and what I found made my hands shake and my heart pound. Bottles and bottles of medications, none prescribed for Elena. Ipecac syrup, something used to induce vomiting, insulin, though Elena wasn't diabetic, sedatives, pain medications, and there, in the back behind the expensive face creams and serums, a small bottle of clear liquid with no label. I recognized some of these medications from my years working in hospitals before I became a nanny. Individually, they might be explained away. Together, they painted a picture that made me feel sick to my stomach. What kind of mother keeps medicines specifically designed to make someone ill? That evening, I watched Elena more carefully. The way she insisted on giving Ava her vitamins personally. The way she smiled when Ava couldn't keep her dinner down. The way she called the family doctor whenever Ava seemed to be feeling better. "She's having another episode," Elena would say into the phone, her voice heavy with theatrical concern. "Yes, I think we need to increase the dosage. My poor little girl just can't seem to get well." I began keeping a secret journal, documenting everything I observed. The dates when Ava got sick, what she ate, when Elena was alone with her, the mysterious clear liquid that appeared and disappeared from the medicine cabinet. A pattern emerged that made my blood run cold. Ava was always sickest after spending time alone with her mother. Always. But who would believe me? I was 63 years old, a woman from Queens with no medical training and no proof except the observations of a broken-hearted nanny. They were the Millers, Manhattan royalty, worth hundreds of millions, with connections throughout the city's medical and social establishment. The breaking point came on a bitter February morning. Ava had been feeling better for almost a week, laughing, playing, eating real food instead of just crackers and weak tea. She had color in her cheeks for the first time since I'd known her. "Margaret," she said that morning as I brushed her hair, "I feel strong today, like I could run all the way to the park." My heart swelled with joy. "Then maybe we will, sweetheart. Maybe today we'll go feed the ducks in Central Park." But Elena had other plans. She swept into the nursery like a storm cloud, carrying a cup of what she claimed was special child-safe tea. "Drink this, darling," she cooed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Mama made it specially for you." I watched Ava's face fall. The light went out of her eyes. She looked at the cup like it was poison. "I don't feel like tea, Mama. My tummy feels good today." "Drink it." Elena's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "Now." Ava's hand shook as she lifted the cup to her lips. Within an hour, she was vomiting violently, her small body racked with pain and fever. Elena called the doctor, her voice full of practiced concern. "I just don't understand it," she said into the phone while I held Ava's hair back as she was sick in the bathroom. "She was doing so well, and then this sudden relapse. Yes, I think we need to consider more aggressive treatment." That night, as Ava slept fitfully in my arms, I made a decision that would change everything. I couldn't prove what Elena was doing to her daughter, but I couldn't stand by and watch any more either. I began secretly collecting samples of everything Ava consumed when Elena was involved. The special teas, the vitamins, the clear liquid I sometimes saw Elena add to Ava's juice when she thought no one was looking. I also started taking photographs, pictures of Ava's medicine cabinet, the bottles in Elena's bathroom, the mysterious symptoms that appeared and disappeared in patterns that made no medical sense. But I needed help, and I knew just where to get it. My nephew Tommy worked as a lab technician at Bellevue Hospital. If anyone could test these samples discreetly, it was him. "Aunt Maggie," he said when I called him that week, "what you're describing sounds like Munchausen syndrome by proxy. It's when a caregiver deliberately makes someone sick to get attention and sympathy." "But Elena's her mother," I protested. "Mothers don't hurt their own children." "Some do," Tommy said quietly. "More than you'd think. And the wealthy ones are often the hardest to catch because they have access to the best doctors and the most convincing stories." He agreed to run tests on the samples I brought him, but he warned me that whatever we found would have to be reported to the authorities, no matter what the consequences. "Are you prepared for that, Aunt Maggie? These people have millions of dollars and the best lawyers money can buy. They could destroy you." I thought about Ava's face that morning when she said she felt strong. I thought about all the nights I had held her while she suffered needlessly. I thought about my own daughter, Mary Ann, and how I would have given anything to trade places with her pain. "I'm prepared," I told him. "That little girl deserves someone who will fight for her." The test results came back 2 weeks later, and they confirmed my worst fears. The special tea contained ipecac syrup. The vitamins were laced with sedatives. The clear liquid was insulin, which could cause dangerous drops in blood sugar in a non-diabetic child. Elena Miller had been systematically poisoning her own daughter for years, creating illnesses that required expensive medical treatment, generated sympathy from their social circle, and kept Ava weak and dependent. But before I could figure out how to report this to the authorities without destroying myself in the process, Elena made a decision that took the choice away from me. "Margaret," she said one Friday morning, her voice colder than I had ever heard it, "we won't be needing your services anymore." "I'm sorry?" The words hit me like a physical blow. "Richard and I have decided that Ava needs more specialized care. We're sending her to a residential treatment facility in Switzerland. Very exclusive. They specialize in children with complex medical needs." My blood turned to ice. A residential facility meant Elena would have complete control over Ava's story, her treatment, her very life. No witnesses, no one to question the narrative Elena had carefully constructed. "What about her improvement this week?" I asked desperately. "She's been so much better." "Temporary," Elena said with a dismissive wave. "The doctors say these brief improvements are common before major relapses. We need to be prepared for the worst." She was lying. I could see it in her eyes, hear it in the slight tremor in her voice. Elena Miller was terrified that someone was getting too close to the truth, and that someone was me. "I'd like to say goodbye to Ava. That won't be necessary. Clean out your room. I want you gone by this afternoon. We'll provide references, of course, but I think it's best if you don't contact our family again. Ever." She handed me an envelope thick with cash. More money than I had ever seen at one time, enough to cover several months of rent and expenses. Guilt money, silence money. As I packed my few belongings in the small room I had called home for 3 years, my heart broke for the little girl sleeping down the hall, unaware that the only person who truly saw her suffering was being banished from her life. I had failed her, just like I had failed my own daughter. But as I folded my uniform for the last time and tucked the journal of evidence into my suitcase, I realized something that gave me strength. Elena Miller had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She had let me go with proof of what she'd been doing, and now I had nothing left to lose. That afternoon, as I walked out of the Miller penthouse for what I thought was the last time, carrying my sister bag and my broken heart, I didn't go home to Queens. Instead, I went straight to the offices of Child Protective Services in Lower Manhattan. "I need to report child abuse," I told the intake worker, a tired-looking woman about my age who had probably heard every story there was to hear. "What's the nature of the abuse?" she asked, not looking up from her paperwork. "Medical abuse. A mother is poisoning her 4-year-old daughter to make her sick." That got her attention. For the next 4 hours, I told my story to a parade of social workers, investigators, and supervisors. I showed them my journal, my photographs, the test results Tommy had provided. I described every symptom, every pattern, every red flag I had observed over 3 years of intimate access to the Miller family's daily life. The investigator assigned to the case was a sharp-eyed woman named Detective Rosa Santos, who specialized in crimes against children. She listened without judgment as I explained how a family worth over $200 million had been using their wealth and connections to cover up systematic abuse. "Mrs. Margaret," she said when I finished, "what you're describing is extremely serious. Medical child abuse cases are complex and difficult to prove, especially when the family has resources like the Millers do. Are you absolutely certain about what you witnessed?" "I held that child through pain that no 4-year-old should ever experience," I said, my voice steady despite the tears running down my cheeks. "I watched her mother poison her with medicines that were supposed to heal. I am certain." "Then we're going to need your help to save her," Detective Santos said, "because if what you're saying is true, Ava Miller is in immediate danger." The investigation moved faster than I had expected. Within 24 hours, Detective Santos had obtained emergency court orders to examine Elena Miller's medicine cabinet, Ava's medical records, and the family's financial documents. What they found painted a picture of abuse that was even worse than I had imagined. Elena had been billing insurance companies and Richard's cryptocurrency investment funds for hundreds of thousands of dollars in unnecessary medical treatments over the years. She had doctor shopped across the city, finding specialists who would order expensive tests and procedures based on her dramatic descriptions of Ava's symptoms. But more damaging than the financial fraud was the medical evidence. When investigators tested Ava's blood and hair, they found traces of multiple substances that should never have been in a child's system: sedatives, emetics, insulin, a chemical cocktail designed to create mysterious symptoms that would baffle doctors and generate sympathy. The arrest happened on a Tuesday morning while I was giving my formal statement at the district attorney's office. Elena Miller, socialite and philanthropist, was handcuffed in her Pilates class at an exclusive studio on Madison Avenue, charged with child endangerment, medical fraud, and aggravated assault. The news exploded across New York's social scene like a bomb. The Miller family, with their vast fortune in stocks and real estate, their Bitcoin investments and charitable foundations, had been hiding a secret that shattered their carefully constructed image of perfection. Richard Miller issued a statement through his lawyers claiming he had no knowledge of his wife's actions, that he had been traveling extensively on business and had trusted Elena completely with Ava's care. His investment firm immediately distanced itself from the scandal, but the damage to their reputation was catastrophic. Within a week, millions of dollars in assets had been frozen as part of the investigation. The Fifth Avenue penthouse was seized as evidence of the lavish lifestyle funded partly by insurance fraud. The Miller financial empire, built on the stock market and cryptocurrency investments, crumbled as investors fled and prosecutors examined every transaction. But all of that was secondary to the most important outcome. Ava was safe. I was allowed to visit her in the specialized pediatric unit where she was being evaluated and treated. When I walked into her room, she was sitting up in bed, coloring in a book. For the first time since I had known her, she looked like a normal 4-year-old child. "Margaret!" she cried, dropping her crayon and reaching for me with arms that seemed stronger than they had ever been. "I missed you so much. The doctors say I'm getting better. They say I might not need any more medicines." I held her close, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair without that underlying smell of antiseptic and illness that had always clung to her. She felt solid in my arms, real, present in a way she had never been before. "I missed you too, sweetheart," I whispered, "more than you can ever know." Over the following weeks, as Elena Miller's trial dominated the local news and Richard Miller's business empire crumbled under the weight of scandal and legal scrutiny, I watched Ava transform. Without the constant doses of harmful substances, her natural personality emerged like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. She laughed. She played. She ate real food and kept it down. She slept through the night without mysterious fevers or stomach pains. She was everything I had always known she could be, given the chance. The doctors were amazed at her recovery. Years of symptoms that had baffled medical specialists disappeared within weeks of removing her from Elena's care. It was a miraculous transformation that proved everything I had documented in my secret journal. But the most difficult part was yet to come. Richard Miller, facing the loss of his fortune and his freedom, made a plea deal with prosecutors. In exchange for cooperating fully with the investigation and testifying against his wife, he received a suspended sentence and agreed to surrender custody of Ava. The question was, where would she go? I never expected the call that came on a gray Monday morning in April. It was Detective Santos, and her voice contained an emotion I hadn't heard before, something like hope. "Margaret," she said, "I have something to tell you. Richard Miller wants to meet with you. There's something about Ava's custody that he wants to discuss." The meeting took place in a sterile conference room at the family court building. Richard Miller looked like a ghost of the man I had known. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by a simple gray sweater that seemed to hang on his diminished frame. His investment empire was in ruins, his assets seized or frozen, his reputation destroyed. But when he looked at me across that conference table, I saw something I had never seen in his eyes before: genuine remorse. "Margaret," he said, his voice hoarse and broken, "I failed my daughter. I was so focused on building wealth, on stock market investments and business deals, that I didn't see what was happening in my own home. You were the only one who truly cared for her." I said nothing. There was nothing to say. "The lawyers tell me I have options for Ava's custody, relatives who would take her in, foster families who specialize in children with medical trauma. But," he paused, running his hands through hair that had gone gray in the months since Elena's arrest, "but there's only one person I trust with my daughter's life." My heart stopped. "Mr. Miller, I want you to adopt her, Margaret, legally, permanently. I want you to be her mother in every way that Elena never was." The words hung in the air between us like a bridge spanning an impossible distance. Me, a 63-year-old woman from Queens with no money, no education, no credentials beyond a lifetime of caring for other people's children. Her, a little girl who had been systematically tortured by her own mother, but somehow still had the resilience to hope. "I know I have no right to ask this," Richard continued. "I know I can't make up for the years I was absent, for the blindness that nearly cost Ava her life. But I also know that you saved her when no one else would. You saw through Elena's lies when I was too cowardly or too selfish to look." "What about your assets?" I asked quietly. "Your fortune?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What fortune? The SEC has frozen everything while they investigate the insurance fraud. The Bitcoin investments, the stock portfolio, the real estate, it's all evidence now. But there was one account Elena never knew about. A trust fund I set up for Ava years ago, before any of this started. It's clean money. Legitimate investments that had nothing to do with Elena's schemes. Several $1,000,000 that belongs to Ava, and by extension, to whoever becomes her legal guardian." He slid a folder across the table to me. "This should be enough to give her a good life, a safe life, the kind of childhood she deserves." I opened the folder with trembling hands. Bank statements, investment portfolios, trust fund documents. It was more money than I could have imagined in 10 lifetimes. But that wasn't what made my heart race. It was the adoption papers already filled out, waiting for my signature. "Why?" I whispered. "Why would you do this?" Richard Miller looked out the window at the gray Manhattan sky, and when he spoke, his voice was barely audible. "Because I remember the night she stopped breathing. I remember running into her room and finding you giving her CPR, breathing life back into my daughter when I thought we had lost her forever. I remember thinking that this woman, this angel, loves my child more than I do. He turned back to me, and I saw tears in his eyes. I remember watching you hold her for 3 years and realizing that you were already her mother in every way that mattered. This is just making it official. 3 months later, I sat in a family court in Manhattan, wearing the only good dress I owned, while a judge made official what my heart had known for years. Ava Miller became Ava Margaret Thompson, my daughter-in-law, as she had already been in love. Elena Miller was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for child endangerment, medical fraud, and aggravated assault. The courtroom was packed with reporters and socialites who had once fawned over her at charity galas, now eager to witness her downfall. She showed no remorse, even claiming during her victim impact statement that she had been trying to help Ava by ensuring she got proper medical attention. I didn't attend the sentencing. I was too busy helping my daughter learn to ride a bike in Central Park, watching her laugh as she wobbled down the path on training wheels, her face bright with the joy of a childhood finally allowed to begin. Richard visits sometimes, not often and always with advance notice, always respecting the boundaries we've established. He's working as a financial advisor now, having lost his licenses for investment banking, but retaining some credentials for basic financial planning. His $1 million penthouse is gone, replaced by a modest apartment on the Lower East Side. The visits are awkward but necessary. Ava needs to know her father, to understand her history without being damaged by it. She calls him Richard now, not Daddy. That title is reserved for special occasions, for the moments when she forgets to be careful with her words and calls me Mom instead of Margaret. We live in a small house in Astoria now. Nothing fancy, but filled with the kind of warmth that no amount of money could buy. There are pictures on the refrigerator, drawings Ava made at school, photos from our trips to the beach on Long Island, images of a life lived simply, but with genuine love. The trust fund Richard set up provides for Ava's future, college, medical care, whatever she needs as she grows up. But we live modestly on the interest, investing the principal in stable bonds and conservative stocks, so it will be there when she truly needs it. I never want her to grow up believing that money is the measure of worth or security. At night, when I tuck her into bed in the small room we painted purple because it's her favorite color, she sometimes asks me about the time before. Not about Elena. We don't talk about Elena, but about the penthouse, about being sick, about the strange dreams she sometimes has of needles and bitter medicines. "Was I really sick, Mom?" she asked me one evening, using that precious word that never fails to make my heart swell. "You were hurt, sweetheart," I told her, smoothing her hair, "but not sick, not really, and you're safe now. You're healthy and strong and loved. Will I ever have to go back there?" "Never," I promised. "This is your home now. I am your family now. Nothing will ever change that." She smiled and closed her eyes, and I sat there in the darkened room, listening to her breathe easily, naturally, without the rattle of congestion or the wheeze of manufactured illness. I think about that house sometimes, the penthouse with its 47 windows and marble floors, now sold to pay for Elena's legal defense and Richard's debts. I think about the medicine cabinet full of poisons, the elaborate charade that nearly destroyed an innocent child, the wealth that couldn't buy the one thing that mattered most, genuine love. But mostly, I think about second chances, about how life sometimes gives us the opportunity to rewrite our ending, to heal our deepest wounds by healing someone else's. I lost my daughter, Marianne, 25 years ago to circumstances beyond anyone's control. The cancer that took her was an enemy we couldn't fight, couldn't outsmart, couldn't defeat with love alone, no matter how desperately we tried. But Ava I could save. Ava I could heal. Ava I could love back to wholeness. She starts kindergarten this fall, a bright, curious, healthy 5-year-old who wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up, so I can help animals feel better. She has no memory of the worst of Elena's abuse, and I pray every day that it stays that way. Sometimes I catch her staring at nothing, and I wonder what shadows still linger in the corners of her mind. but then she'll turn to me with that brilliant smile and ask if we can make cookies or go to the playground. And I remember that children are more resilient than we give them credit for. The other day, we were walking through Central Park, feeding the ducks at the pond near Fifth Avenue. I couldn't help but glance up at the tall buildings of the Upper East Side, knowing that somewhere up there was the penthouse, where we had both suffered and where our real family was born in the crucible of that suffering. "What are you looking at, Mom?" Ava asked, following my gaze. "Just remembering," I said. "Good remembering or bad remembering?" I looked down at her upturned face, at eyes that sparkled with health and curiosity instead of pain and fear, at cheeks pink with cold air and happiness instead of fever and illness. "Good remembering," I said truthfully, because all of it led us here. She nodded solemnly, as if she understood something profound about the nature of survival and healing, then ran ahead to chase the ducks, her laughter echoing across the water like a song of freedom. I am 68 years old now. My hair is completely gray. My hands are more arthritic than they used to be, and I move a little slower than I did when I first walked into the Miller penthouse all those years ago. But I have never felt more alive, more purposeful, more grateful for the gift of each ordinary day. We have a routine now, Ava and I. Saturday mornings are for pancakes and cartoons. Sunday afternoons are for the library, where she checks out stacks of books, and I help her with the harder words. Weekday evenings are for homework and art projects spread across our small kitchen table. It's not glamorous. There are no stock market portfolios to manage, no Bitcoin investments to track, no social galas or charity events to attend. Our wealth is measured in bedtime stories and goodnight kisses, in scraped knees tended with patience, in the simple miracle of a child who sleeps peacefully through the night. But sometimes, when I'm folding laundry or washing dishes, I remember that woman I used to be, the nanny who carried her heartbreak like armor, who loved other people's children because she couldn't save her own, who accepted invisibility as the price of staying close to the light of childhood innocence. That woman taught me how to fight for someone who couldn't fight for herself. She taught me that sometimes the greatest act of courage is refusing to look away when everyone else finds it convenient to remain blind. She taught me that love without advocacy is just sentiment. But love with advocacy can move mountains. I often wonder if there are other women like I used to be, caregivers who see things others miss, who carry the weight of other people's secrets, who love children fiercer than their own families do. I wonder if they feel as helpless as I once felt, as silenced, as afraid to speak truth to power. If you're that woman, if you're watching this and recognizing yourself in my story, please know this: your observations matter. Your concern is valid. Your love is not foolishness or over-attachment. It's the purest form of protection. Trust your instincts. Document what you see. Find allies who will listen. Don't let anyone convince you that you're overreacting or imagining things. Children depend on adults who are willing to see their suffering and act on it, even when it costs everything. I know how terrifying it is to challenge people with power, money, and connections. I know how easy it is to convince yourself that you're wrong, that important people with impressive medical degrees and extensive stock portfolios must know better than a simple caregiver. But here's what I learned. Love sees what power misses. Proximity reveals what distance obscures. And sometimes, the person with the least to gain and the most to lose is the only one capable of telling the truth. Ava is 7 now, and she's thriving in ways that still amaze me. She makes friends easily, excels in school, and has never spent a night in a hospital since Elena's arrest. Her laughter fills our small house like music, and every morning when she runs to me for a hug before school, I'm reminded of the miracle of her survival. She doesn't know the details of what her biological mother did to her. The therapists we work with have helped us navigate age-appropriate ways to discuss her early childhood without traumatizing her further. She knows she was sick when she was little, that Elena made some very bad choices, and that she's safe now. One day, when she's older and ready to understand more, we'll have deeper conversations about the complexity of her history. But for now, she's just a little girl who loves horses, hates broccoli, and wants to learn to play guitar. Richard sends birthday cards and holiday gifts, always tasteful and never extravagant. He's remarried, a kind woman named Sarah who works as a social worker and understands the complexity of their situation. I've met her several times, and I believe she's genuinely committed to respecting our family structure while encouraging Richard to maintain appropriate contact with his daughter. The money Richard left in trust for Ava remains largely untouched, growing steadily through conservative investments. She'll have financial security when she reaches adulthood, enough to pursue any education or career she chooses. But more importantly, she'll have the security of knowing she's truly loved and valued for who she is, not for what she represents or provides to others. Sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, I allow myself to grieve for all the years we lost, all the pain that could have been prevented if someone had listened sooner. I grieve for the little girl who wondered if everyone was going to hurt her, who hoarded crackers under her pillow, who learned to expect pain as the price of attention. But mostly, I celebrate the resurrection we've both experienced. She's been reborn from a victim into a thriving child. I've been reborn from a grieving, powerless caregiver into a fierce, protective mother. The scars remain. There are still nights when Ava wakes up from nightmares she can't quite explain. There are moments when she instinctively flinches if someone moves too quickly near her face. She's cautious around medical professionals in ways that break my heart. But there's also joy, pure, uncomplicated joy in simple pleasures. The first time she rode a roller coaster, screaming with delight instead of pain. The first time she got sick with an ordinary childhood cold and realized that medicine actually made her feel better instead of worse. The first time she looked in the mirror and said, "I look strong today." We've learned to be a family in the most fundamental sense, two people who choose to love each other unconditionally, to protect each other fiercely, and to build a life together based on trust and genuine care. I never expected at my age to be packing school lunches and attending parent-teacher conferences. I never imagined I'd be learning to French braid hair or shopping for training bras or having conversations about friendships and playground politics. But here we are, navigating the beautiful, ordinary challenges of raising a child who's been given a second chance at childhood. And every single day, I'm grateful for the courage that brought us here, for the investigation that saved her, for the judge who believed our love was real enough to make it legal. The Miller scandal faded from the news cycles years ago, replaced by other stories of wealth and corruption, other cautionary tales about power unchecked. But for us, the ripple effects continue to unfold in positive ways. Ava's case helped change hospital protocols for reporting suspicious patterns of childhood illness. New York State implemented stronger oversight for families with extensive medical claims. The investigation revealed other cases of medical child abuse that might have otherwise gone undetected. Detective Santos, who became a friend over the years, tells me that my willingness to speak up inspired other caregivers to come forward with their own concerns about children in their care. She estimates that at least 6 other children have been protected because someone followed the example of our case. That knowledge sustains me on the harder days, when I'm exhausted from single parenting at an age when most women are contemplating retirement. It reminds me that our suffering wasn't meaningless, that Ava's pain led to protection for other vulnerable children. She wants to know about her story someday, not the brutal details, but the broad outlines of how she came to be my daughter. I'm prepared for that conversation, with professional support and age-appropriate resources. What I'll tell her is this: sometimes people we should be able to trust make choices that hurt us. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us become the ones we need protection from. But there are also people in this world who will fight for us when we can't fight for ourselves, who will see our worth when others see us as disposable, who will choose love over convenience even when it costs them everything. I'll tell her that she survived something terrible and came out stronger, that she taught me about resilience and hope, that she gave my life meaning and purpose I had thought were lost forever. Most importantly, I'll tell her that she deserves love that doesn't come with conditions, care that doesn't come with hidden costs, and respect that doesn't have to be earned through suffering. These are lessons every child should learn, but lessons that become precious when you've lived without them. The house we share in Astoria isn't fancy, but every room holds evidence of a life lived with intentionality and joy. There are photos on every surface, not the staged professional portraits that filled the Miller penthouse, but candid snapshots of real moments. Ava blowing out birthday candles, building sandcastles, dancing in our small living room. The kitchen table bears the scars of homework sessions and art projects. The walls are painted in cheerful colors that Ava helped choose. Her bedroom is filled with books we've read together, stuffed animals she's actually played with, artwork that reflects her genuine interests rather than someone else's idea of what a little girl's room should look like. It's a home built on authentic relationships rather than financial transactions, on daily choices to prioritize each other's well-being over social expectations or material accumulation. I think about the penthouse sometimes, the cold beauty of it, the way wealth had been used as a shield for cruelty, the isolation that came with elevated status. I remember the marble floors that reflected our footsteps but never absorbed our warmth, the views of the city that kept us separate from real community. Now we know our neighbors. We shop at the local bodega where the owner asks about Ava's school activities. We attend community events at the library and the park. We're woven into the fabric of ordinary life in ways that feel solid and sustainable. Money still matters. We need security, medical care, educational opportunities. But wealth isn't our goal or our measure of success. Building a life where Ava feels safe, valued, and free to become herself. That's our success story. She's talking about college now, even at 7 years old. She wants to study animals, or maybe law, or possibly both. I want to help, she tells me. I want to make sure no one gets hurt like I did. Her desire to transform her pain into purpose moves me beyond words. She's too young to understand the full weight of what she's saying, but I see in her the seeds of someone who will spend her life protecting others. Whether she becomes a veterinarian, a lawyer, a teacher, or something else entirely, I know she'll carry forward the lessons of our journey together. She'll remember what it feels like to be genuinely seen and loved. She'll recognize the difference between care that heals and care that harms. She'll trust her instincts about people and situations. Most importantly, she'll know that survival isn't just about enduring trauma. It's about thriving beyond it, about using your experiences to create something beautiful and meaningful. As I write this, she's in the next room practicing piano, a skill she asked to learn, not something imposed on her for appearances. The music floats through our small house, imperfect but joyful, the sound of a child who feels free to make mistakes because she knows she's loved regardless. The melody mingles with ordinary household sounds, the dishwasher running, the heat clicking on, the distant hum of traffic on the street outside. It's the symphony of a life lived authentically, without pretense or performance. I look at my hands now, still worn from decades of caregiving, but no longer carrying the weight of powerlessness. These hands held a dying child and breathed life back into her. They collected evidence that freed her from torment. They signed papers that made our love official. They braid her hair every morning and check her fever when she's genuinely sick. They're the hands of a mother now, not just a caregiver. They're the hands of a woman who learned that love without action is just sentiment, but love with courage can literally save a life. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, if you've felt the echoes of your own experiences in mine, then you understand why I needed to tell it completely, honestly, without diminishing the pain or rushing to easy answers. The truth is that recovery from systematic abuse is complicated and ongoing. The truth is that fighting powerful people requires more courage than most of us think we possess. The truth is that love alone isn't enough. It requires advocacy, persistence, and sometimes sacrificing everything you thought you wanted for what you know is right. But the truth is also that healing is possible, that children are more resilient than we imagine, that families can be created through choice and commitment rather than just biology, that sometimes our deepest wounds become the source of our greatest strength. Have you ever loved someone who couldn't love themselves yet? Have you ever seen abuse disguised as care and wondered if you were imagining things? Have you ever had to choose between safety and truth, between protecting yourself and protecting someone more vulnerable? Tell me your story in the comments below. Share what spoke to your heart, what challenged your assumptions, what gave you hope for your own journey. If this story touched you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps these stories reach other women and men who need to know they're not alone in their experiences of loving, losing, fighting, and healing. For more stories that explore the complexity of family relationships, the power of resilience, and the beauty of found families, click on our special podcast series linked to the left. We've gathered narratives that honor the full spectrum of human experience, the pain and the triumph, the loss and the recovery, the darkness and the light. Thank you for walking this path of the heart with me, for witnessing Ava's transformation and my own, for believing that love combined with courage really can change everything. Until we meet again in our next story, remember, you are seen, you are valued, and your observations about the world around you matter more than you know. Today marks the 5th anniversary of Ava's adoption, and we celebrated with a small party in our backyard. Just us, Detective Santos and her family, my nephew Tommy, and 2 of Ava's closest friends from school. The cake was homemade, slightly lopsided because Ava insisted on helping with the frosting, and it was perfect in ways that no expensive bakery creation could have been. As we sat around our modest table under the apple tree we planted together 3 years ago, I watched Ava blow out her candles and make a wish she whispered only to me. I wish that all the kids like I used to be find someone like you. My heart nearly broke and healed all at once in that moment. This child, who had endured systematic torture disguised as motherly care, was using her birthday wish not for toys or trips or personal desires, but for the protection of other vulnerable children. Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and the dishes were washed and put away, Ava and I sat on her bed, looking through the photo album we keep of our life together, page after page of ordinary moments made extraordinary by their authenticity. First days of school, Halloween costumes, trips to the zoo, lazy Sunday mornings, reading comics in our pajamas. "Mom?" she said softly, using the word with increasing frequency now that she's secure in our relationship. "Do you ever miss the fancy house?" It was a question I had feared and prepared for, one that spoke to the complexity of a child trying to understand her own history and the choices that had shaped her short life. "The house was beautiful," I told her honestly, "but it wasn't a home. A home isn't about marble floors or expensive furniture. It's about feeling safe, feeling loved, feeling like you belong exactly as you are." She nodded thoughtfully, then turned to a page showing her in our small garden, dirt-stained and grinning as she held up a tomato she had grown herself. "I like our house better," she said with the conviction of someone who had learned to recognize the difference between appearance and reality. "Here I can be loud and messy and nobody gets mad." That night, as I watched her sleep peacefully in her purple bedroom with its mismatched furniture and walls covered in her own artwork, I thought about the journey that had brought us both to this place of quiet contentment. The legal battles were over now. Elena had served 6 years of her 12-year sentence before dying of a heart attack in federal prison, taking her secrets and her pathology with her to the grave. Richard had completed his community service and paid substantial restitution to the insurance companies his family had defrauded. He had rebuilt his life on a smaller scale, finding meaning in honest work and occasional visits with the daughter he was learning to know as the person she truly was. The Miller fortune was gone, dispersed among legal fees, restitution payments, and the trust fund that Richard had preserved for Ava's future. The penthouse had been sold, the art collection auctioned, the cryptocurrency investments liquidated to pay for the damage done in the pursuit of maintaining Elena's elaborate deception. But in losing everything material, we had gained something infinitely more valuable: the freedom to build a life based on authentic love rather than performative wealth. The transformation in Ava over these 5 years had been nothing short of miraculous. The pale, fragile child who once flinched at sudden movements had grown into a confident, curious, vibrant girl who approached the world with appropriate caution but genuine enthusiasm. Her health was robust now. No more mysterious fevers, no more hospital visits, no more cabinets full of medications she didn't need. She played soccer in the local league, took swimming lessons at the community center, and had learned to ride her bike without training wheels in the small park near our house. More importantly, she had developed the psychological strength that comes from knowing she is valued for who she is, rather than for the drama her suffering could provide to others. She trusted her own instincts, spoke up when something bothered her, and had learned healthy boundaries in ways that would serve her throughout her life. The therapy we had both undergone in those first crucial years had taught us how to navigate the complex emotions and practical challenges of our unusual family structure. Dr. Patricia Williams, the child psychologist who had guided us through the hardest conversations, had become both professional support and personal friend. "What you've accomplished together," she told me during our final session, "goes beyond healing from trauma. You've created a template for what love with advocacy looks like. You've shown that families can be formed through choice and commitment rather than just biology, and that sometimes the deepest bonds come from the courage to protect someone when no one else will." Her words stayed with me as I navigated the ongoing challenges of single parenthood, the complexities of ensuring Ava understood her history without being defined by it, and the delicate balance of maintaining connection with Richard while protecting the family structure that had become our foundation. The financial security provided by Ava's trust fund had allowed me to focus entirely on her well-being rather than worrying about basic survival. We lived modestly but comfortably, able to afford good health care, quality education, and the kinds of enriching experiences that help a child develop confidence and curiosity about the world. But more than financial security, we had emotional wealth that no amount of money could have purchased. We had inside jokes and family traditions, quiet moments and celebratory ones, the accumulated history of two people who had chosen each other and committed to building something beautiful from the ashes of something terrible. I thought about that history as I prepared breakfast on a typical Monday morning, watching Ava organize her backpack and chatter about the science project she was excited to present to her third-grade class. The ease of our morning routine, the absence of tension or fear, the simple pleasure of a child who approached each day with anticipation rather than dread. These were the metrics by which I measured our success. "Margaret," she said, using my name when she wanted to discuss something serious, "Mrs. Chen asked if you could come speak to our class about being a foster parent. She said lots of kids need families like ours." Mrs. Chen was Ava's teacher, a wise woman who understood that every child's family structure was unique and valuable. Her request reflected a growing recognition that our story could serve as encouragement for others navigating similar journeys. "What would you want me to tell them?" I asked, curious about how Ava perceived our experience and what aspects she thought might be helpful to share. that sometimes the best families are the ones people choose for each other, she said with the profound simplicity that children often bring to complex topics, and that you don't have to stay in places that hurt you, that there are grown-ups who will fight for kids even when it's scary. Her perspective reminded me of why our story mattered beyond our own healing. In a world where child abuse often happens behind closed doors, where wealth and social status can shield perpetrators from consequences, where caregivers sometimes feel powerless to challenge systems designed to protect adults rather than children, our experience offered proof that determined advocacy could make a difference. Over the years, I had spoken at conferences for childcare workers, training sessions for medical professionals, and support groups for people who had survived various forms of family trauma. Each time, I emphasized the same core messages: trust your observations, document your concerns, find allies who will listen, and remember that every child deserves protection regardless of their family's social standing or financial resources. The letters and emails I received after these presentations confirmed what Detective Santos had observed, that sharing our story had encouraged others to speak up about situations they had witnessed, leading to investigations that protected vulnerable children who might otherwise have continued suffering in silence. One letter in particular stayed with me, from a school nurse in Connecticut who wrote, "After hearing your story, I trusted my instincts about a student who was always sick but never seemed to get better, despite extensive medical treatment. The investigation revealed a situation very similar to what Ava experienced. That little boy is safe now because you had the courage to share what you learned." These connections between our experience and the protection of other children gave meaning to the pain we had endured and the risks we had taken to escape it. They transformed our personal story into part of a larger narrative about the responsibility adults have to protect children, even when doing so challenges powerful people or comfortable assumptions. At the same time, I was careful not to let our public role overshadow the private reality of building a life together. Ava needed to be a normal kid with normal concerns, not a poster child for survivor resilience or a symbol of triumph over adversity. She played with dollhouses and collected stickers and worried about pop quizzes and argued about bedtime like any other 8-year-old girl. She also happened to be someone who had survived medical abuse and found safety through the efforts of a caregiver who refused to remain silent. But that was her history, not her identity. The balance between honoring our story and protecting her childhood was one I navigated daily, always checking with her about what she was comfortable sharing and making sure she understood that her privacy was more important than any public good our story might serve. "Do you like it when people know about us?" I asked her once after a particularly intense presentation, where several audience members had approached her with well-meaning but intrusive questions about her early childhood. "I like that it helps other kids," she said thoughtfully, "but sometimes I just want to be Ava, who's good at math and bad at spelling, not Ava, who was poisoned by her mom." Her wisdom about the complexity of survivor identity impressed me repeatedly. She understood intuitively that while her experience was part of her story, it didn't have to be the defining aspect of her personality or her future. This understanding served her well as she navigated friendships with children who came from more conventional family structures. She could explain our relationship in age-appropriate terms without feeling ashamed or different, and her friends accepted our family as just one of many variations on the theme of people who loved each other and took care of each other. The normalcy of her social relationships was perhaps the greatest indication that our approach to healing had been successful. She didn't carry herself as a victim or a survivor, but simply as a child who had found her place in the world and was expanding confidently from that secure base. Her confidence extended to her academic work, her sports activities, and her creative pursuits. She excelled in school without the pressure to be perfect that had characterized her early years. She made mistakes, learned from them, and moved on without the catastrophic thinking that often accompanies childhood trauma. She also developed the kind of empathy that comes from personal experience with vulnerability. She was naturally drawn to classmates who seemed lonely or left out, quick to defend kids who were being teased, and instinctively protective of anyone who appeared to be suffering. Ava has unusual insight into when someone needs extra kindness, her teacher observed during a parent conference. She seems to recognize pain in ways that other children her age might miss, and she responds with genuine compassion rather than pity or curiosity. This emotional intelligence would serve her throughout her life, but it also reminded me to watch for signs that she might be taking on too much responsibility for others' well-being. Children who have experienced trauma sometimes become hypervigilant about others' safety, and I wanted to make sure she could be appropriately caring without feeling burdened by everyone else's problems. Our therapy sessions, which had evolved from crisis intervention to periodic check-ins, helped us navigate these nuances of post-trauma development. Dr. Williams helped Ava understand that caring about others was a strength, but that she wasn't responsible for fixing everyone's problems, just as the adults in her early life had been responsible for protecting her, rather than expecting her to manage their emotional needs. These conversations about appropriate boundaries and healthy relationships were ongoing, woven into our daily interactions and family discussions about current events, friendships, and social dynamics. They were part of the larger project of raising a child who could trust herself and others appropriately, who could form healthy attachments without losing her individual identity. As Ava approached her 9th birthday, I found myself reflecting on how much our lives had changed and stabilized since those terrifying early days when her very survival seemed uncertain. The anniversary dates that had once been triggers for anxiety, the day she was hospitalized, the day Elena was arrested, the day the adoption was finalized, had become occasions for gratitude rather than renewed trauma. We had developed our own version of these memories, acknowledging their significance without dwelling on their pain. The day Elena was arrested had become the day you got safe. The day of the adoption had become the day we became official. The various medical crises had become simply when you were little and sick before we knew what was really wrong. This reframing helped Ava integrate her history without being overwhelmed by it, and it helped me process my own complex emotions about the journey we had shared. I could acknowledge the horror of what she had endured without being consumed by rage at Elena or guilt about not intervening sooner. I could celebrate our bond without minimizing the trauma that had preceded it. The work of healing, I had learned, was not about forgetting or minimizing what had happened, but about integrating those experiences into a larger story of survival, growth, and purposeful living. It was about using the wisdom gained through suffering to create something meaningful and beautiful. As I watched Ava playing in our backyard with neighborhood children, her laughter mixing with theirs in the late afternoon sunlight, I felt the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing you have fulfilled a sacred responsibility. She was not just safe, she was thriving. She was not just surviving, she was becoming the person she was meant to be all along. The little girl who had once asked me if I was going to hurt her now ran to greet me with spontaneous hugs and shared the details of her day with the confidence of someone who knew she was valued and heard. The child who had hoarded crackers under her pillow now occasionally forgot to finish her dinner because she was too busy talking about her friends or her latest book. These ordinary moments of childhood contentment were the miracles I had hoped for during those dark days in the penthouse when her survival seemed so uncertain. They were proof that love combined with courage really could transform lives, that justice was possible even when the odds seemed impossible, that healing could happen even after the most profound betrayals of trust. The investment of everything I had to offer, my credibility, my security, my comfortable invisibility, had paid dividends beyond anything I could have imagined, not just in Ava's healing and growth, but in my own transformation from a powerless caregiver to an empowered advocate and eventually to a mother in the fullest sense of the word. I had learned that love without action might feel meaningful to the person experiencing it, but it offered little protection to the person needing it. I had learned that speaking truth to power required more courage than I thought I possessed, but that the courage came from the necessity of protecting someone more vulnerable than myself. I had learned that families could be created through choice and commitment, and that those bonds could be as strong as any biological relationship. Most importantly, I had learned that it was never too late to become the person you were meant to be, to fulfill the purpose that had been calling to you even when you couldn't imagine how to answer it. At 63, I had thought my life of significant action was behind me. At 68, I discovered it had just begun. As the sun set over our small garden and Ava came inside to start her homework, grass-stained and glowing with the simple happiness of a child who had spent an afternoon playing freely with friends, I felt the profound gratitude that comes from knowing you have participated in something miraculous. We had both been reborn through our journey together. She from victim to survivor to thriver. Me from broken-hearted caregiver to fierce advocate to confident mother. We had created something beautiful from something terrible. Proved that love with advocacy really could move mountains and built a family that honored both our individual stories and our shared future. The penthouse with its 47 windows was gone, displaced by a small house filled with laughter and art projects and the accumulated debris of a life lived with intention and joy. The wealth accumulated through stock market manipulation and insurance fraud had been replaced by the different kind of abundance that comes from authentic relationships and purposeful living. And the little girl who had once been systematically poisoned by the person who should have protected her had become a confident, curious, thriving child who approached each day with the expectation of goodness rather than the fear of harm. These were the returns on an investment of the heart, the dividends of courage, the compound interest of love combined with action. They were proof that sometimes the greatest risks yield the most meaningful rewards, that speaking up for the voiceless can transform not just their lives, but your own, and that even in the darkest circumstances, hope and healing remain possible. Thank you for walking this path of the heart with me, for witnessing Ava's transformation and my own, for believing that love combined with courage really can change everything. Until we meet again in our next story, remember, you are seen, you are valued, and your observations about the world around you matter more than you know.